Hello and welcome to Coast AM's official YouTube channel. I'm your host, George Norrie. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel. And you can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and of course, on coasttocoastam.com.
Welcome. Welcome to everyone listening all around the world, all across the United States. We are coming to you live from the ET Contact Center of Knowledge and Information, which is the Coast to Coast AM studios right here in Los Angeles, California. Sitting in for George Norrie tonight, I am your host, Jimmy Church. And tonight, Barry Littleton is with us. Now, we're going to talk about his life, about lifelong contact with extraterrestrial intelligence and the alien presence on our planet, Earth. But a couple of weeks ago, I had a chance to hang out with Barry and listen to his presentation up at ECETI Ranch over the July 4th weekend. And before he took to the podium, he came up to me in the back behind the crowd there, and he's sweating, and he's wiping the sweat off, and he says to me, "I'm so nervous right now." I said, "Barry, just go do it. Just go do it." And he got up there. And he opened up. I sat in the back and with a couple of friends and just listened to his story, his experiences, and they are so complete. And what I mean by that is there is a little bit of everything going on with Barry. You know, of course, we have his contact through childhood to the present day, and we're going to talk about that tonight. I know that we have that. But there is also the technical side. You know, the technology, the craft, the things that he witnessed, the ETs themselves. He's got names and clothing and different races, and he's even got a witness. Now, after his presentation, I went up to him and I said, "Where have you been?" And I meant that. The world needs to hear your story, I say to Barry, and he came back with, "This is the first time I've ever spoken public about this, man, but it feels so good." Well, here we are, 2 weeks later, and I've got Barry right here on Coast to Coast AM. I had to make sure that we got him here as soon as possible to share his story with all of you. It is amazing. So buckle up, kids. This is going to be one of those shows. Last week, I released a video about something that appeared to open on the top of Mount Adams while we were there. Barry was there, and I was up there speaking at a conference at the ECETI Ranch. And it was posted last week on the Coast site. As soon as we released it through Coast. And if you haven't seen the video of what went on, you can still check it out. Just click on my name there on the Coast front page. It'll take you right over to my site, and you can watch the video for yourself. Now, what is important here, and the reason why I'm mentioning this is, first, Barry tonight, our guest, was there with us last week. That's a strange coincidence. But I know that there are people listening right now to Coast because of that video, and they are wondering if I'm going to mention anything about it. Now, this is what I need to kind of stress here, is there were some things that I just left out of the video. The video was done fairly quickly. I just wanted to get the evidence out there and then, do some follow-up investigations and research and so forth. But what is important that didn't really get stressed in that video was that we shot images all day long. Now, we are approaching 500,000 views right now in this video over the last 6-7 days on YouTube. And the overwhelming comments that are there are cool, but it looks like it could be a shadow, and why didn't you just hike up there? Okay, what's not stressed in this video is I was up there to speak. I wasn't up there to go mountain climbing. And I'm not a mountain climber. And the mountain was 13 miles away. It looks like it's in your backyard in the video, but it's 13 miles away on protected Indian land. You just don't go and do a mountain climb on a whim. So that's why that wasn't done. But next, it's not a shadow. We shot it from morning to night, hundreds of photographs, and the opening did not go away. All of the images that we looked at prior to the discovery, of which we looked at hundreds, it's just not there. The opening is not there. Now, what it is, I don't know. I can't explain what we saw. It could be a volcano. It could be a lava tube. It could be natural. It could be man-made. It could be alien. I don't know. But it's on top of Mount Adams. And with all of the UFO activity that we saw over the 4 or 5 days that we were there, all around, above, and in front of the mountain, it's incredible to witness. And then to have this opening just show up in front of us on Friday morning just added to the mystery. And it is incredible. As of tonight, it is still there and open. Okay? We had over 100 witnesses. And one of those witnesses is our guest tonight, Barry Littleton. So, turn down the lights and get ready. We're about to have one of those fabulous evenings right here. It's all ET all night long. You can follow me right now on Twitter at JChurchRadio. You know the drill. Twitter is always live to my left. The studio is Doc. Any questions or comments, you can post them, and maybe your tweet will get read on the air. And, of course, enjoy the bumper music tonight. And yes, there's a serious theme going on. Would love to hear your comments. And of course, later on, we're going to open up the phones because it is Friday night. It's another Friday here on Coast. Filling in for George Norrie, I'm your host, Jimmy Church, and I'll be right back with my guest, Barry Littleton. This is Coast to Coast AM. Welcome back to Coast AM. Sitting in for George Norrie tonight, I am your host, Jimmy Church. Friday night, open lines. It's going to be one of those shows. So please just kick back, get comfortable, get close to the radio, turn it up, and have a great time. It's going to be an amazing conversation because my guest tonight is Barry Littleton. He has degrees in psychology, sociology, and ethnic studies from Wichita State University. And his childhood experiences included encountering disincarnated people, strange playmates, and awakening not in his bedroom or his house. There was no way of proving these events, so he asked for them to become more tangible, to be more physical. Now, at the age of 18, the experience did. It resulted in 4 separate encounters that totaled about 18 hours of missing time. The combined experiences of missing time, consciousness encounters, and past life memories led him to a vast amount of research in an attempt to verify and explain just what was going on. Now, he's physically been on several different craft and has been seen several different types of extraterrestrial beings. In late 2010, Barry was involved in a near-terminal car accident, and it is this accident that caused him to go out and start speaking about his contact experiences. More on this in just a bit. Tonight, we're going to cover the life of Barry, from first contact through the present day. And I would like to welcome to Coast for the first time, Barry Littleton. Barry, good evening, sir.
Good evening, Jimmy. How you doing? Thank you very much for such a gracious introduction.
How are you?
I'm well. Still kind of recovering from the jolt in perception that happened at ESETI. I think that's common at that place, actually. Just things that expand your consciousness are experienced there.
Yeah, well, you know, ESETI is a magical place. It's not just about the UFOs. It's the experience itself. And if you're there for discovery and self-discovery and enlightenment, whatever your passion, you're going to find it at ESETI. It is absolutely a truly magical place. And for you, watching your presentation there, Barry, I know that you were sweating. You're probably sweating now, and that's okay. But everybody was so in. You know what I mean? They were engaged, word for word from beginning to end. That's got to make it easy on you, doesn't it?
Well, it was wonderful. I mean, I didn't expect that much of a reception in that way. It's so warm, everybody was. So the openness and the communication that went down that entire conference was incredible. So,
well, let's kind of do this before in this first segment, because Your life went through several amazing. There's several sections to it, but your childhood for me was pretty amazing. So why don't we start there? What started for you, indicating that there was something going on?
The first thing was I would tend to wake up. I don't sleep well, and this kind of aggravated it. But I would tend to wake up not in my home. And I had a pretty normal childhood as far as pretty protected and, nothing really out of the ordinary said of that. I would wake up in the night not in my home, and it would seem I would be at another school, like another grade school it seemed like, but there was not a teacher in this room, and the room was darker, and there was like objects on the table, like a feather, some water, these spherical balls, and the first thing I'd have to do is start trying to move the feather with my mind. And I could never actually see the instructor, but I could hear them telepathically.
How old were you?
At that point, probably about 7, whenever all that started happening very vividly.
Now, so
7.
Okay, so then you go to your real school, and what was that experience like?
Frustrating, because I couldn't make anything move psychokinetically at my school, here in this dimension. Nothing like that could happen. And also I was starting to become aware, too, that I was a telepath, and I could often sense people's thoughts, especially the other children, like the things, not fully in their mind, but the stuff on the surface. And I think so many of us that are sensitive can do that. And then you start realizing that your classmates can't do it. It starts making you feel a little bit ostracized.
Did you go to your teachers or your family and try to relate to them what was actually going on, or did you keep it to yourself?
I kept it to myself. I had a pretty good imagination, and sometimes you can imagine that you might have a playmate or imagine that things are happening to you or something like that, but that's different. These are real experiences.
What was
They weren't tangible enough for me to prove to somebody else.
Well, and what was your family like? Was it a religious family? Was it strict? Were your parents open-minded? What was going on there?
Spiritually, they were open to let me pursue as long as it was on a positive love frequency I could pursue. They weren't forcing religion upon us. Pretty normal in that way. I say my parents are old school. I was a little bit kind of an accident, and they were a little bit older at that point, so they were a little strict. I mean, there wasn't much I could pull on them that my siblings hadn't already tried.
And this was in Oklahoma?
No, in Kansas.
Oh, Kansas. Why did I think Oklahoma? So this is, well, okay, the Midwest. Right? So, and your neighborhood, the typical middle-class environment there? Yeah,
it was a middle-class neighborhood. Had a few playmates around, too. The school was within walking distance, so most of us, knew each other to a certain degree.
Well, I ask this because was anybody else in the neighborhood, any of your friends or neighbors, having these same experiences? No one was having anything like that I know of. And if they were, they haven't told me to this day. And now that I've come forward, I think they probably would have told me by now. What about when you were in this classroom with the bowl and the feather and the balls? Did you see any other children there?
Yes. At first I didn't see any, but then it seemed that there were these spherical balls, and you could levitate them with your mind, and they kind of would spin around. I got pretty good at doing that. And next time I went back to the school, that's kind of what I call it, I was taken to another room, and in this other room there were students. And I was being asked to perform these exercises and show them. And I had said no. I kind of refused to because I was pretty frustrated the fact that I couldn't seem to do this in my day school. I wasn't able to do this, so I kind of refused to do the exercises, and I don't recall being invited back there anymore. But the students themselves, I've been asked before if they look like hybrids or something like that, and they look like human children to me, just like myself. I didn't get the sense that they were anything different than just human like myself.
How were you being taken from your room?
When I would fall asleep a little bit, and suddenly I would wake up and I'd be somewhere else in this school. Or once or twice I'd fall asleep and I'd wake up. There was a field actually where there was these like cows. They did like a milk thing out there, kind of close to where my parents stayed. Sometimes I would just wake up and I'd be in this field out there, and then suddenly I'd fall back asleep and I'd wake back up in my bed. And little things like that were happening that were very strange.
How long did this go on for?
Oh, several years. I'd say till around the age of probably about 11. But they started changing. The contact themselves started changing as far as somebody started coming around when I was later, about a little bit more into 7, and other things started happening that I couldn't put together until I got older, if that makes sense.
How many times do you think you went to this school?
I'd say 4 or 5 times.
4 or 5 times, and you also started to make contact with another playmate there in the neighborhood. What was going on there? Now, we'll pick up on this after the break, of course, because this was somebody that you ended up making contact later on in life. But what was going on with him, and how did you make that contact?
Okay, actually, it was I thought he was a kid that would show up and play with me sometimes. And this sounds silly, but there was where I stayed. There was this curve, and the water would come down the curb, and like if my brother or somebody was washing their car, it would come really fast. And kids do things like make a little dam to try to stop the water, and it was very important because I thought it would flood the world or something. So this gentleman would show up every now and again. This kid would, and like help me make dams and play with me a little bit. I was very well supervised, but he tended to show up for just a second on his bike and hang out with me when nobody was around. And within the 10 minutes somebody comes around, he suddenly had to leave. You know, but I thought he was a child at that time because he was playing with me. I swear it was important to him to stop that water as it was me. So,
what and how did he look? How was he able to change his appearance?
You know, now that I'm older, I see that these beings can project themselves a certain way. He appeared to be about my age, but he had these. He would always have on these sunglasses that looked more like. Only way I can describe him is in the 60s they had those things called kitty cats that were very large glasses.
Right.
He would have those and normally a hat on and just be dressed like a kid. But I could see now that that was enough to kind of throw me off. And whoever saw him, because there were several times that somebody might come out and he would play for a second, then he'd have to leave. Or he showed up on my school ground one day when my mom was in a conference and he played with me out there. He stopped these kids from pushing me off a slide, actually. I'll never forget it. And so he appeared to be a person to other people also.
Now, when you're a kid, everybody knows everybody. You're in everybody's business. Didn't anybody question that they didn't know who he was or what school he went to or where he lived? You know,
I did, because there were other kids that seemed like more freedom than me. People could ride around more than me. But actually, when he would come around, I'd ask him, because there were 2 schools within walking distance of where I lived. So there's a chance he maybe went to the other school that was called Price. So I said, do you go to Price? And he said, no, I'm just here visiting family. I don't go to school here. That's what he would say, and I didn't recognize that he was very much a telepath. So I liked that he could telepathically communicate with me when other kids could not. So I figured that just he was, somebody just different like me.
Well, what about his hands and his face and maybe his arms, long sleeve shirts and gloves? I mean, how did he get away with that?
Hey, he looked like a kid. He looked like a kid in that way, but the only thing that was odd about him was his eyes, and how he would keep them kind of concealed with those kitty cats. And now that I look older, that I can think back, that's somebody that is not blending in the way that they think they are,
Now, we're going to head into a break. I want to set up for when we come back. You had a sighting with your mom at a very young age that was revealed later to you by your mom. We're going to talk about that after the break. But what were you and your mom doing that day that you had this sighting?
Actually, it was my birthday, around my birthday, and I had gotten a toy. It was called a Stretch Armstrong. Anybody my age would know what that is. And I had gotten it, and I swear the first day you start pulling that thing, it was this goo started leaking out of it. So my mother said it looked like it was nuclear or something, so she was taking me to this place called Ardennes to get a replacement for Stretch Armstrong. And we saw this craft during that process.
Now, did you at that time say anything to your mom? Well, you know what? We're going to take a break right here. So let's go ahead and do that. But what's interesting about this part of Barry's life is he didn't recall this until much later when his mom, Barry, was looking at an Omni magazine, classic UFO in Omni. And she says to Barry, "Hey, that looks like the flying saucer that you and I saw. Remember that?" We'll talk about that right after this short break. Tonight, Barry Littleton. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. This is Coast to Coast AM. Now, I want to do a little community service announcement here. Tomorrow morning, right after I wrap Coast at 2 a.m. Pacific, I'm heading over tomorrow, Saturday, July 22nd, for the JAWS Symposium. It's an online telethon in support of John Anthony West and his fight with cancer. John Anthony West is a member of our family. He is somebody that has been a leader in our community, and this is what we do for family. He has done more for research and breaking down those walls than just about anybody out there. Okay, now it's hosted by Den of Lore and myself. We're going to have Robert Bivall, Laird Scranton, Randall Carlson, and Graham Hancock, among others. And you can find info on everything over at Jimmy Church Radio on my Facebook page and denoflore.com. But we'll see everybody over there tomorrow. Kicks off at like 10 a.m. and then goes through tomorrow night. Okay, so I'll see everybody over there tomorrow. Tonight, it's Friday. It's open lines. It's Coast to Coast AM. And we have first-time guest Barry Littleton. And I'll be right back. This is Coast to Coast AM. Welcome back to Coast AM. Sitting in for George Norrie tonight. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Our guest, Barry Littleton, has degrees in psychology, sociology, and ethnic studies from Wichita State University, but he is officially out of the closet. Now, Barry, we were talking right before the break about this sighting that you and your mom had with the Stretch Armstrong. Later, this would come back to you. What was unique about that experience, and for me, the missing time, and try to clarify what it's like to be in two places at the same time?
Okay, well, what happened here was actually I had vague memory of actually seeing this craft as we were going from one store to the other. And I didn't actually, and I'd had experiences when I was a child, and then they stopped for a while from about the age of about later part of 12 to about 18. I maybe had one experience during that time. So I kind of focused on the ones that happened after that were these physical experiences like I had asked for. And those were much more tangible, and they involved missing time. So when I was actually in my 30s, when I went over to my mother's house for lunch one day, and I was looking through these old Omni magazines she was going to throw out, and I used to love me some Omni, and I was looking at different UFOs that they had for this one episode, this one magazine, this one issue, and my mother walked by, and she happened to just go, she points to one, she goes, "Oh, that looks like the one you and I saw." And when she said that, I turned and looked at her, I said, "What?" And she said, "You remember that UFO that we saw over the Eastgate Mall?" And it just kind of shocked me for a minute because I couldn't remember it. And I had ran into a local clairvoyant probably about 6 months before that kept talking about I had seen a ship with a parent, and I couldn't remember that. See what I mean? So being somebody that had all this contact, and the fact that I could not remember that specific sighting, which would be my first one, I knew that there was some type of missing time involved. Only when they're involved is time missing like that. So I wanted to explore that a little bit further and try to see what all connected to that.
Now, all of that was when you were 30 with this confirmation with your mom. When you were 18, when everything started to get physical, of course, you remembered all of those experiences. What was it like to have your mom, so many years later, come back and help you confirm what has been going on in your life? And was she cool with it?
I didn't often say how intense my contact was. I didn't disclose that because my parents they're pretty normal people. They were. My mother's passed now. But she was somewhat, open to the paranormal, but not really into it, if that makes sense. So it wasn't anything I would disclose like that. outside of the fact that I just couldn't seem to remember it. But when I had to ask her more questions about it and get her to actually describe what happened so it would kind of jar my memory, you know, like her saying things. So at first I thought they must be filming some movie or something until it took off and was just kind of a dot in the sky. And I remembered that and certain things she was saying, then I could start remembering seeing the craft. And she said something like, she goes, "You, Mr. Star Trek guy, with that creepy memory of yours, you can't remember seeing that craft?" And later on, I mentioned my brother. I said, "You know, I can't remember seeing that." And he said, "Oh, you definitely saw it. Because when I came over, you and Mama were just going on about it again and again. So you definitely saw it."
And your brother, how is he with these experiences today? You know, like I just said, you've come out. You're out. There's no going back in.
You know, he's cool with it. Actually, he's encouraged me to be where I'm at now as far as speaking out. And I have another brother that actually has had a few experiences of his own. They're different than mine, but that makes both of them more tractable to it.
Now, let's go back to the age of 18. You had asked for physical proof. You wanted this to be more tangible. So what did you do about it?
Well, it was actually, that goes back to when I was actually 12, the experience that happened there. I have to tell you, it was my friend that kept showing up, and every now and again, I told you, looked kind of odd. One day on the playground, he tells me the day he stop these kids from pushing me off the slide, sometimes he'd have a backpack on most of the time. I remember he tells me, he says, "I want to show you something." And he's kind of standing right by me, and he runs and, like, he gets ready to jump, and as he runs, okay, he takes maybe 4 steps, and underneath the backpack comes out these little wings. And the only way I can describe them to you is if you've seen a ladybug, before they take flight, they have these 2 black wings that kind of go in a cross formation underneath their hard shell.
Right.
Yeah, then they'll take up, then this hard shell will raise and they'll fly. I saw these little wing things, and he jumped what must be about probably 10 feet. And he tells me, "What do you think about that?" And I kind of start yelling at him. I think there's, you know, you're a bug or something. There's something wrong with you. Get away from me. Don't ever come back. And he never showed up again, all right, until I wake up one night on this craft, and he's in a different outfit, and he's floating on this craft. And he's talking to me, and I can see out of this kind of a screen, a projector, I can see other craft out there, and I'd say now that I know what mountains look like, it looks like we're over some type of a mountain pass, and I can see these ships sucking up something into their underbellies.
Right.
And he starts saying, the acid rain is very bad for your planet. We're trying to reverse it, but we're having trouble with it.
What year was this?
This would have been, I was in the 6th grade, so that would have been about 1986.
So acid rain, was that even in the public at that point? Had you heard of it?
Jimmy, no. And I spent, and at this point, this is one of those experiences when I'm having these and I'm waking up not at home. If I see, even if I couldn't see the beings, I question. And, you know, so I started questioning things like that, like, "Are you lying to me?" Because I never heard of acid rain before. And what was that? And so that's what he tells me. The experience is kind of over. You go back into a different sleep or whatever. And then about maybe a week later, in the 6th grade, and my teacher was having us read, once a week we'd have to read what was called the Scholastic News. It was pretty informative, but she chooses me to read this one. And the beginning of this one, on the front of it was the Statue of Liberty. And when I had to read the main article, it was about the Statue of Liberty being shut down for however many months because they were repainting it due to the damage caused by acid rain. And when I saw that in writing, right at my normal school, I mean, it confirmed what he was telling me on this craft. Now, at first, I couldn't put it together, seeing him in this different outfit, seeing him floating above the deck and in this uniform, and looking very much like a grasshopper, okay? More so, his pure form. I didn't understand this was the same kid that had been coming and playing with me occasionally, if that makes sense.
Well, I don't want to sound crazy here, but acid rain kind of came and went. Do you think your friend might have actually had something to do with it? That's fascinating.
That's a good question. That's a good question, my friend.
I don't remember ever defeating acid rain. Right? It was certainly a big amount of fear across the United States and around the world around that time. I remember that. But whatever happened to acid rain? That's very interesting. Okay, I can already see the email coming in now. Everybody can save it.
CFC things that are called chlorofluorocarbons, but I don't remember that getting under control enough to actually control the smog and the acid rain. So
right.
Yeah.
Okay, so back when you're 18, you had 4 separate encounters that started at that age that total about 18 hours of missing time. And we'll get into that specifically. But what was the inspiration to go and start to attempt to figure this out?
The experience that I just told you about, the acid rain, that would be when I had that was proof that this stuff was real. Because that was so far out that I couldn't have made it up. And any one of us, when we perceive something, we know if we're imagining it or not. When you're physically experiencing something, you know it. So I asked for more tangible evidence. I mean, that was at a point around then where, the movie E.T. had come out, and E.T. had showed him how to make a shortwave radio. So I tried to make a shortwave radio. I got in trouble for busting up my toys. I had tried to actually telepathically force more contact and ask it, and I tried everything, and it seemed like it went null until I was 18. I had this dead zone from about 12 to 18 in experiences. So despite the fact that I was trying to force them to come and happen, it just didn't work. And in result, I also started doing a lot of research to try to understand what was happening to me, and I was also guided to a lot of different materials as well, because I had past life memories when I was born with, so I was always trying to validate that as well. And
then you partnered up with somebody.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So tell me about it.
Yeah, I actually once did date someone, but we were kind of into meditations and a lot of the metaphysical and spiritual stuff. And one night I was kind of pulling one of the little, as a teenager, pulling one of those 18-year-old scams, like, let's go in the country and find a nice parking place and raise our kundalini with some good meditation techniques. So that was my little scam, So we went out to the country and found this remote place out there. And we actually are trying to meditate, all right? And it was almost an inward revolution, one of the deepest meditations I've ever had. And I open up my eyes, like I kind of break out of this, open up my eyes, and I see this ship pulse in over this pond we were parked in front of. And it ships over. It's a fairly large ship, and it's got a light on the top of it that's going circulating. And every time I can see it, it's like coming around me. It's like almost a radio station tuning me in. So that's how that began there. So I was definitely not going out and parking by that pond trying to see UFOs. That wasn't.
Right. Well, you're laughing. I'm not laughing right now. It must have been a little scary.
Well, at first it was the fact I was telepathically tuned into it in a way I'd never felt before was interesting. But, I tried to tell her, because she was meditating and she's kind of sitting there in lotus position in my passenger seat.
Right.
I tell her, hey, do you see this thing out here? And she never opened her eyes and looked at it. She's kind of shook her head at me and said, hey, whatever that is, that's your thing. Leave me be.
Right.
So I said, okay. So I just closed my eyes again and tried to go back with this telepathic feeling because I didn't want the contact, whatever was happening, to stop. Because I could clearly see this craft out there. It was rather large, and I could feel it, and it was tuning me in. So I tried to just go with it more, if that makes sense.
Did she open her eyes?
At that point, no. I go back into this meditation thing with it, and I can kind of see things to a certain point, and all of a sudden I feel a break in the frequency. And when I open up my eyes, she is looking at this thing, okay? And I mean, at this point, her head is almost between the front windshield and the dashboard. She's looking at it. And I told her, I said, listen, they've been there a long time. Don't, start freaking out. You might mess it up. And she starts looking at me and looking at this thing and looking back, and she starts kind of hyperventilating. And then the ship takes off, to the left. And then next thing I know, we're kind of standing outside of my car. And the car is, turned around. And she's looking at this thing saying, that we can go up there at this ship. And I'm saying, you get in the car, what? And at this point, I'm thinking, okay, we're so far out here. Maybe we've been sitting there too long and fell asleep or something, and it's the sheriff. Was doing something like that had happened. But then as this ship, keep watching it, it moves over. Another one shows up, looks more like a ball. And the one that I'm already been observing morphs into these crystals. It looks similar to what people now call Merkaba, but it was a little different than that. It almost looked like a molecule.
So it was a square within a square, like a Merkaba.
Yeah, well, no, more like this crystal balls with these stalagmites coming off of it. And
okay.
Rods connecting it. So in that way, it looked, more like a clustered crystal ball, but they similar to Merkaba in the way it had what J.J. Hertog's Keys of Enoch calls a tri-pyramidal Merkaba.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I understand. How long did when the two of you exited the car and you noticed that the car was turned around, how long did that event last? Because that was conscious. You're awake at this point. How long did that event take place?
It would have seemed like maybe all this went down for about 20 minutes. The meditation, watching the craft, trying to tune it back in and suddenly be outside of the car, that happened so quick. It seemed like, maybe it had been 20 minutes. But in reality, it had been about 4.5 hours. Well,
and when did you figure that out?
As soon as we got back in the car and started trying to, because it seemed like all this information was departed after, I guess everybody calls it download now. After we actually saw these craft and it was apparently over, we're trying to get back to town and we're relaying information. But the closer we got to town, and we get to town because we want to write this down, try to record it or something, we're having problems remembering exactly what happened.
Now, the next event, we're going to take a break here in exactly 2 minutes. So give me the 60-second setup of the next event.
The attempt to recreate contact at the same spot again and again failed. And one night, actually, I was at my old job, and she had came to get me. Actually, and we were leaving, and kind of had a spiritual experience, a feeling. And she says, maybe we should go out there now. Something might happen. And that kind of led to the second event that led to about another 4.5 hours of missing time.
And in this second event, you go back to the same location. Were the crafts the same?
No. Actually, on the way out, she kept pointing, and it's so far out there, but at a certain point you get on those country roads, deer will be jumping around, so I didn't really pay attention. And I could see the craft several times as we're driving out there, but when we actually get to the spot itself and I get the car shut off and everything, it's gone. I can't see that anymore. But there's something else that starts happening just before that, and that would be an amazing amount of lightning bugs, fireflies.
Really?
Yeah, and the females don't fly as much as the males. It's the males that really fly around. The females tend to be in trees or wherever. So we've got you can see hundreds and hundreds of males flying around, lighting up, and the trees out there are almost lightening up musically, woom, 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 and seeing a lot of that. And she's saying the same thing, what happened to the ship. And I'm thinking, well, maybe it's more about the fireflies. Maybe it's the firefly this time.
Let me jump in right there. We're going to take a break. Our guest is Barry Littleton. And you know what? Out here on the West Coast, no fireflies. I know that sounds crazy, but everybody's a firefly expert in the Midwest. This is Coast to Coast AM. I'm your host, Jimmy Church, sitting in for George Norrie. We'll be right back.
Thank you for listening to Coast AM on our official YouTube channel. I'm your host, George Norrie, and don't forget to visit the Coast Insider membership area on coasttocoastam.com, where you can access our past, upcoming, and classic shows.